Have you ever noticed that at certain moments in life, you encounter a sentence, a video, or a quiet inner sensation, and without any dramatic sign, you know something inside you is about to change? Not the kind of change where you promise to try harder or improve a little, but a deeper shift, calm yet undeniable, as if life itself is preparing to move you into another chapter. No one announces it. There is no warning light, yet you feel it in your body before you can explain it with your mind. According to Jung, these moments are never random. They are intersections where the unconscious briefly touches conscious life, inviting you into a journey most people sense but rarely answer. What makes these moments so powerful is how easily they are ignored. Most people dismiss them as fleeting moods or passing curiosity. They scroll past, return to routine, and bury the sensation beneath familiar obligations. But Jung observed that when such moments arise, something has already begun moving beneath the surface. The unconscious does not shout, it whispers. And when you find yourself here, listening to these words, it is often because a part of you has already started turning away from an old direction, even if your outer life has not yet caught up. In Jungian psychology, a true comeback does not begin with visible success. It begins with a quiet return to the self after a long period of disconnection. A person does not decide to awaken in the way one decides to complete a task. Awakening arrives when the psyche can no longer tolerate living in a shape that has grown too small. This is why the feeling often comes with subtle discomfort. Things that once felt acceptable now feel tight. Conversations that once flowed easily now feel hollow. You may not be able to name what is wrong, but you can feel that something no longer fits. Jung described this as the awakening of the unconscious, a phase where the deeper layers of the psyche begin signaling that growth is necessary. These signals rarely come with logic. They arrive as restlessness, sudden boredom, heightened sensitivity, or an unexplainable pull towards something unfamiliar. You might find yourself revisiting old ideas, books, or dreams you once abandoned. You may feel drawn to stories of transformation without knowing why. These are not coincidences, they are invitations. There is a reason these invitations feel both gentle and unsettling. The unconscious does not care about your comfort. It cares about wholeness. When a person has lived for too long in adaptation, pleasing expectations, suppressing instincts, or surviving rather than living, the psyche eventually pushes back. Jung believed this push is not a crisis, but a correction. It is the self attempting to realign life with inner truth. Think of a river beneath ice. From the surface, everything appears still, but underneath, water continues to move. Pressure builds, and cracks begin to form. When you experience the quiet sense that your life is about to change, you are standing at one of those cracks. You may not yet see the direction of the flow, but the movement has already begun. This awakening often comes with a strange sense of inevitability. You feel as if something has already been decided without your conscious consent. That is because, in Jung's view, the self operates on a deeper timeline than the ego. The ego plans, resists, negotiates. The self simply moves when the moment is right. And when it moves, it often uses subtle signals to guide your attention. A video that appears at the right moment, a phrase that resonates unexpectedly, a sense of recognition you cannot explain. Many people mistake this phase for confusion. They believe something is wrong because they no longer feel motivated by the same goals. But Jung argued the opposite. When old desires fade, it is not because you are losing direction, but because your psyche is withdrawing energy from paths that no longer serve your growth. What once felt meaningful may suddenly feel empty, not because it was meaningless, but because its purpose has been fulfilled. This is why awakening rarely feels triumphant. It feels quiet, sometimes heavy, sometimes lonely, yet beneath that stillness is a powerful intelligence reorganizing your inner world. Jung believed that true transformation always begins in the dark, not as punishment, but as preparation. Seeds do not sprout in open air, they break underground. As this awakening unfolds, You may notice subtle changes in perception. You become more aware of energy in conversations. You sense when situations drain you rather than nourish you. Your intuition sharpens. Even if your confidence wavers, you may feel tired and restless at the same time. This is not contradiction. It is the psyche reallocating resources, pulling energy away from old patterns to prepare for something new. The most important thing to understand about this phase is that it does not require validation. A person entering a true comeback does not need permission or applause. They simply feel a quiet certainty that staying the same is no longer possible. Just as a tree does not ask whether it should grow, the self moves when its time arrives. Jung wrote that those who ignore this call often experience increasing inner tension, anxiety without cause, a sense of being trapped in a life that looks fine from the outside but feels wrong on the inside. The psyche will continue sending signals until it is heard, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. Growth postponed eventually becomes suffering. If you are here, reading this, there is a strong possibility that this awakening has already begun for you. Not as an idea, but as a felt sense. You may not yet know what you are moving toward. You may not yet have the courage to name it, but the awareness itself is enough to mark the beginning. This is the moment Jung described as standing at the threshold. 1 foot still in the old world, 1 foot touching something unknown. It is uncomfortable because it demands honesty. You cannot unfeel what you have felt. You cannot unknow what your intuition has shown you. From this point on, something must change, even if that change begins slowly, invisibly, without drama. And once this awakening takes root, the journey does not move forward in a straight line. It leads you into a strange and unsettling territory where the old dissolves before the new has taken shape. A phase many fear, but few understand. When the awakening has begun and the old no longer fits, you enter a phase that confuses almost everyone who experiences it. You no longer belong to your former life, yet nothing new has clearly appeared. This is the in-between state, Jung described as one of the most necessary and misunderstood passages in psychological development. People often call it being lost. Jung called it transformation in its rawest form. In this phase, life feels strangely hollow, not dramatic, not tragic, just empty in a quiet, unsettling way. Things that once gave you direction no longer speak to you. Roles you once played effortlessly now feel like costumes you have outgrown. You wake up with a vague sense that something is missing, yet you cannot name what it is. The temptation during this period is to panic, to rush back to what once felt safe, or to force clarity where none is meant to exist yet. Jung warned that this moment is precisely where most people turn back. The ego hates uncertainty. It would rather return to a familiar discomfort than stay with the unknown. And so many people misinterpret this phase as failure, as regression, as proof that they made a mistake by questioning their old life. In reality, this is the psyche clearing space. The old structure is dissolving, but the new one has not yet solidified. This dissolution can feel like standing on ground that is slowly giving way beneath your feet. You may feel tired without being physically exhausted. You may feel disconnected without being depressed. You may question your competence, your identity, your direction. But this questioning is not pathology. It is the ego loosening its grip. Jung referred to this stage as the dark night of the soul, not as a poetic metaphor, but as a psychological reality. The darkness does not come because something has gone wrong. It comes because the old light was artificial, built on adaptation rather than truth. The psyche must dim that light so a deeper one can emerge. During this phase, you may find yourself withdrawing from old routines without consciously deciding to. You may stop chasing goals that once defined you. You may feel resistance toward expectations that once guided your choices. Others may not understand this shift. They may tell you that you are wasting potential, being ungrateful, or overthinking. But the psyche does not respond to arguments. It responds to necessity. One of the most unsettling aspects of this phase is the loss of motivation. You are not lazy. You are not broken. You are between identities. The energy that once fueled your actions has been withdrawn because it no longer aligns with who you are becoming. Jung believed this. Withdrawal of libido. Psychological energy is essential. Without it, the psyche cannot redirect itself. This is why forcing positivity during this period often backfires. Telling yourself you should be happy, productive, or grateful only deepens the inner conflict. The psyche is asking for honesty, not performance. It wants you to admit that something has ended, even if you do not yet know what is beginning. Another common experience during this phase is a heightened sensitivity to meaninglessness. You may become acutely aware of superficial conversations, repetitive routines, or empty ambitions. Things that once distracted you no longer work. This can feel isolating, as if you are out of sync with the world around you. But this isolation is not rejection. It is recalibration. Jung observed that when the old ego dissolves, the psyche enters a symbolic space, similar to mythological initiations. The hero leaves the known world, wanders without direction, and faces uncertainty before discovering a deeper truth. Modern people experience this internally, without ritual or guidance, which is why it feels so destabilizing. In this phase, time may feel distorted. Days pass slowly, yet weeks disappear without clear milestones. You may feel suspended, as if life is happening elsewhere while you wait for something undefined. This waiting is not passive. It is incubation. The psyche is reorganizing beneath the surface. It is also during this period that suppressed material begins to stir. Not fully yet, but faintly. Old memories, subtle emotions, unexplained reactions. The unconscious is preparing to bring something into awareness, but it does not do so all at once. It tests your capacity to stay present without fleeing. The danger here is self-betrayal. Many people, unable to tolerate ambiguity, choose to return to old patterns simply to regain a sense of control. They take jobs they have outgrown, enter relationships that feel familiar but hollow, or adopt identities that no longer reflect them. Jung believed this is how people become stuck in cycles, repeating the same life with different details. But if you remain, if you allow the emptiness without rushing to fill it, something remarkable begins to happen. The silence becomes less threatening. The lack of direction becomes a space rather than a void. You begin to sense that not knowing is not the same as being lost. This is the moment when the psyche prepares for its most decisive move. When the surface identity loosens enough, the deeper material can rise, and what rises next is often the part of you that was never allowed full expression, the part you learned to hide, suppress, or judge. This is where the journey takes a turn that many fear, but none can bypass. Because once the old has dissolved and the space has been created, the shadow begins to emerge. When the space has been cleared and the old identity has loosened its grip, the psyche does something that often frightens people more than the emptiness ever did. It brings forward what was hidden. This is the moment Jung described as the rising of the shadow, not as punishment, not as regression, but as liberation. The shadow is not the worst part of you. It is the most honest part you were never allowed to live. As the shadow begins to surface, emotions may intensify without obvious cause. Anger appears where you once felt numb. Sadness arises where you once stayed functional. Resistance shows up where you once complied. Many interpret this as losing control, as becoming unstable. But Jung insisted this is the exact opposite. You can only encounter the shadow when your psyche is strong enough to face it. The shadow carries everything you were taught was unacceptable. Your assertiveness when it was labeled selfish. Your anger when it was called dangerous. Your need for boundaries when it was framed as disloyalty. For years, perhaps decades, these aspects were pushed down in the name of survival, belonging, or love. Now, with the old ego dissolving, they rise not to dominate you, but to be integrated. Jung famously said that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. What this means in lived experience is simple yet profound. When an emotion arises, you stop running. When a reaction appears, you observe rather than suppress. When discomfort surfaces, you stay present instead of escaping, and in doing so, the shadow loses its destructive charge. This phase often coincides with heightened emotional reactivity. Small things may trigger strong responses. Old wounds may feel closer to the surface, but what is happening neurologically and psychologically is a release of stored energy. Emotions that were frozen in the body and psyche finally find movement. Once seen, they no longer need to scream. As the shadow integrates, something subtle but powerful shifts. You begin responding differently to life, not because you force yourself to, but because the inner structure has changed. Where you once reacted automatically, you now pause. Where you once explained yourself, you now choose silence. Where you once endured, you now step away. Jung described this as the reorganization of the ego-self axis. The ego no longer dominates decision-making. The self begins to lead. This does not make you passive or detached. It makes you grounded. You are no longer driven by fear of abandonment, fear of judgment, or fear of loss. You act from alignment rather than defense. This is when others begin to notice a difference. Not necessarily because you announce it, but because your energy has changed. You speak less, but with more clarity. You engage selectively. You no longer chase understanding or validation. This can unsettle people who were accustomed to your old patterns. Those who benefited from your compliance may resist your growth. Jung observed that individuation often leads to temporary alienation, not because you have become cold, but because you are no longer predictable. At this stage, withdrawal from the crowd becomes natural, not as avoidance, but as a ceremonial silence. Your psyche pulls energy inward to consolidate its transformation. Noise becomes intolerable. Superficial interactions feel draining. Solitude feels nourishing rather than lonely. This is not isolation. It is incubation. Jung himself entered such a period after separating from Freud. He withdrew from public life, stopped publishing, and spent years confronting his inner world. To outsiders, it looked like collapse. In truth, it was gestation. From that silence emerged the foundations of his most influential work. Transformation requires privacy. The psyche cannot reorganize itself under constant observation. During this withdrawal, you may feel a growing indifference toward things that once consumed your attention. Social approval loses its grip. Comparison fades. The need to explain yourself diminishes. This is not apathy. It is sovereignty. You are no longer oriented outward for permission to exist. And then, often quietly, something remarkable begins to happen. Life responds, not dramatically, not magically, but precisely. Jung called this synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that reflect inner alignment. A conversation appears at the right moment. An opportunity arises without force. A message arrives when you are ready, not desperate. Synchronicity is not the universe rescuing you. It is confirmation. When the inner world reorganizes, the outer world rearranges. You begin to notice that effort gives way to flow, not because life becomes easy, but because you are no longer fighting yourself. This is when you realize the comeback you imagined as a future event has already begun. Not with applause, not with recognition, but with internal coherence. Your nervous system is calmer, your reactions are cleaner, your choices are truer. You no longer wait for permission to live differently. You simply do. Jung believed the true measure of transformation is not achievement, but freedom from unconscious compulsion. When you no longer repeat patterns that once controlled you, when old fears lose their authority, when your past no longer dictates your present, this is the tipping point. Not a moment of explosion, but a quiet crossing. From the outside, your life may look unchanged. Internally, everything is different. You have crossed from survival into expansion, from adaptation into authenticity, from fragmentation into wholeness. This is individuation, not perfection, but integration. The greatest misunderstanding about a comeback is thinking it arrives when something external changes. A new role, a new relationship, a new status. Jung understood that the deepest transformations happen long before anything visible shifts. By the time the world notices, the change has already been completed inside. If you feel steadier, quieter, less reactive, if you sense a calm confidence that does not need display, you are already in it. The comeback is not coming. It is happening. It has been happening in silence. Decision by decision, moment by moment, and this is where the journey completes its circle. You do not return to who you were. You return to who you always were beneath the layers of adaptation. The self that existed before fear taught you to shrink, before expectations taught you to perform, before survival taught you to forget yourself. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. That privilege is not granted. It is claimed, and it begins the moment you stop running from your inner truth. You did not arrive here by accident. You did not listen this far by chance. Something in you recognized itself along the way, and that recognition is enough. The rest will unfold in its own time. Your comeback does not need witnesses. It only needs honesty.